Picture this. You're a person who was born and raised in a small, sleepy fishing town in the north of Europe. You're a fan of football or soccer, but as one does when they're in a small, sleepy fishing town, your local team, your local club is not doing great. In fact, you've even heard rumors that they might be going bankrupt, and you thought, well, that's a shame, but it's fine, we weren't doing much in the National League anyway. So you start following football clubs all across Europe that are more famous. For example, Manchester City, or maybe Inter Milan. Fast forward 15 years, and your local football club has just beaten Manchester City, Atletico Madrid, and Inter Milan across 2 legs, beating them 5-2, with the second leg being in the San Siro Stadium, which has a capacity larger than your entire town's population. At this point, you think to yourself, wait, how the hell did we just do this? Good news, you're not the only one wondering that. This is the story of Bodø Glimt. Welcome everyone, my name is Rigel, and today I want to talk about what is perhaps one of the best Nordic football achievements ever, and the story isn't even over. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Bodø Glimt have beaten 3 major teams in a row, basically. They drew 2-2 to Dortmund. They beat Man City 3-1 at home. They beat Atletico Madrid 2-1, and then they beat Inter Milan across 2 legs, 5-2 on aggregate, with 3-1 at home and 2-1 away at the San Siro. So how are they doing this? And you Norwegians, before you hop into the comments, yes, I know the town is pronounced Bodø, because I studied Norwegian a while back. I know it's pronounced Bodø, but we're not speaking Norwegian, are we? We're speaking English, so I'm going to call it Bodø, alright? I'm going to call the club Bodø Glimt. So, let's go back to the club, and this is a really impressive set of results. Now, if you look at their matches before then, you've got mixed results. 2-2 against Slavia Prague, 2-2 against Tottenham Hotspurs, who ironically were the ones to knock out Bodø Glimt from the Europa League last year at the semi-final, losing to Galatasaray 3-1 away. But to be fair, it's away, it's Galatasaray. They were always going to win because of just the sheer atmosphere in Turkey. Losing to Monaco 1-0, incidentally making Monaco the only side to have kept a clean sheet against Bodø. Losing to Juve 3-2, also, I think that's at home. It's at home. They lost to Juve 3-2, and then they drew to Dortmund 2-2, and so on and so forth. But here's the thing. Up till this point, up till they drew 2-2 to Dortmund, they were at high risk of just getting knocked out at the group stage. They needed to beat Man City and Atletico Madrid to basically even make it to the round of 32. Or, well, the knockout round. I think of it as the round 32. I don't know if it is actually 32, but whatever. They had to beat Man City and Atletico Madrid to even get to that point. And they did just that. And it was a huge shock when Bodø beat Man City 3-1, instantly, with Erling Haaland on the squad on that day, actually. And it was a great shock, but people were like, okay, they're terrible away from home, though. How are they going to beat Atletico Madrid? And they did it. They beat Atletico Madrid in Madrid. I think it's called the Metropolitano or something like that. They beat them 2-1 with that one goal from Atletico Madrid. Incidentally, being from a Norwegian, from Sorloth, who I think was actually on the Bodø Glimt squad for a brief moment in like 2015 or something like that. So yeah, it's kind of come full circle. And then they had to face Inter Milan, who, let me remind you, Inter Milan are currently still 10 points above second place in the Serie A. And you're thinking, at that point in time, they were also the club that had conceded the second fewest goals in the entire group of clubs, basically. And then they played against Inter, rather, and they dropped 5 on them. 3 at home and 2 away in San Siro. It is a seriously impressive result for a team that, by all means, should not have the capacity to do this. Again, the town, let's go back to the town, they have a population of 42,831. And they are literally in the Arctic Circle. This is a map of them just in Norway, not even in Europe. That's how far north they are in Europe. And even in Norway, they're considered to be a very northern place. And yet, they've beaten Inter Milan twice and even dropped 5 goals on aggregate across 2 matches. It is seriously impressive, and I think a lot of people, especially people who are just kind of casuals watching the Champions League, a lot of them are asking, how the hell are they doing this? Well, let's talk a little bit about the tactics, but I'm not the person to go to for that kind of stuff. I'll leave a few links in the description for a few videos that I've watched, which actually go into the tactical aspect of Bodø Glimt in far greater detail than I could ever hope to do. But my basic understanding is that they're not doing anything particularly alien or new. They're just doing a relatively basic formation, perfectly drilled to a T, and they're just really aggressive with counterattacking, basically. So they hunt for mistakes. They press the hell out of any of their opponents. They run like hell. They literally have the highest number of kilometers run during each match, or like just overall in general. They just absolutely try to run their opponents off the pitch, which is kind of funny because according to a FODMOB thing that I saw a while ago in a video that I watched, second place in that running the largest distance thing was Inter Milan, and yet Bodø has just run them off the pitch, and they forced a bunch of mistakes, like the one from Akanji that led to the first goal against Inter Milan at San Siro. And yeah, it's nothing fancy, but they're doing what they do very well. Again, links in the description for more detailed tactical analysis. And, when we talk about, is this the greatest Nordic football achievement in recent history, a lot of people who know Norwegian football will bring up Rosenborg. You can see here, Rosenborg, they also advanced to the Champions League round of 16 in the 1999-2000 season. But here's the thing. The format was different. We know, of course, that Bodø Glimt, they managed to get to the round of 16 after beating Man City, beating Atletico Madrid, and then going into the playoff round and beating Inter twice. But if we look at the 1999 UCL, you can see here they were eliminated at the second group stage. There were actually 2 group stages. In the first group stage, you can see Rosenborg, they topped their group against Feyenoord Dortmund, funnily enough, and Boavista. And if we look into the second group stage, they were bottom of the group against Bayern, Real Madrid, Dynamo Kiev, and they never got to any sort of playoff. And so I would argue maybe what Bodø Glimt has done is actually more impressive than what Rosenborg did in 1999 UCL. So yeah, that's another thing to take into consideration. And I think I would argue as well that the opponents that Bodø Glimt have faced are more challenging, and the fact that they managed to beat Man City and Atletico Madrid just to get into the playoff round, I think that shows a bit more. It feels more impressive than what Rosenborg had done, and obviously it's not comparable because I don't know enough about early 2000s Norwegian football, but it is what it is. And overall, I still feel like Bodø Glimt are a lot more impressive in that sense, and I believe Rosenborg has more like funding and things like that as well, which again, it just makes what Bodø Glimt are doing even more impressive. And the fact is, even if you strip away the whole small fishing town thing, the whole 40,000 population thing, there's not a lot of clubs, even the big ones in the UCL, who could reliably pull off what they just did against these three clubs. And I watch videos from Zealandism. I don't watch his main channel because I don't really care for Football Manager. I watch Zealandism where he talks about football, and he estimates that this streak that Bodø Glimt have been on, he thinks that only two clubs that are in the current UCL could do this reliably, and those are Bayern and PSG. And I'll be honest, I would dispute the PSG part. They have been very shaky and very just exhausted in the last couple of games. I mean, did you see what they did against Monaco? They barely scraped through into the round of 16. So yeah, but Zealandism thinks that PSG and Bayern are the only teams he would confidently bet to be able to beat these three clubs in a row, basically. And it just makes it even more impressive. Like he said, that even Barcelona, a team as high profile as Barcelona, probably couldn't reliably say, okay, we can beat Man City, Atletico. Didn't they just lose to Atletico as well? And then beat Inter Milan twice. It is seriously impressive, even for a club of great stature, of infinite money or whatever. But for a team, again, of a tiny fishing town with really not a lot of funding to them, to be able to pull off what most big football clubs in Europe couldn't do, yeah, there is no precedent to this. I feel like this is absolutely more impressive than what Rosenborg has done. Rosenborg are great, but I'm pretty sure, like, my understanding is that their funding is greater than that of Bodo's. I think they're also more southern, which, makes their playing condition more amicable, let's just say. And yeah, so I would argue, even if, and that is a pretty big if, I would say, even if they get knocked out by Sporting by like 8-0 on aggregate or something, this would still be the most impressive Norwegian achievement in league football. We'll see what they can do at the World Cup, but in terms of league football, I think what Bodø Glimt is doing has basically no precedent, at least in the modern era, in the past like 30 years or what have you. People have compared them to other countries. I think there was a club from Cyprus called Poel or something, I might be pronouncing that wrong, who beat Lille or something like that. I didn't follow league football at that point, and obviously you can tell, but yeah, that might be comparable. But honestly, if we talk about the impressiveness and the gap, the chasm between all of these well-funded, massive clubs with huge followings, Man City, Atletico, Inter, versus the tiny, tiny Bodø Glimt. Yeah, I struggle to find a bigger difference than this, a bigger giant slayer, a bigger David and Goliath story than this. And they've just beaten 3 Goliaths in a row, one of them twice. So yeah, I just feel like this is very impressive, and the scale of just how impressive this is really should not be dismissed. But if we're talking about all of these tactics, we have to talk about their manager. And the manager is, of course, Knutsen. And he's been in this post since about 2019, I think. And that's kind of unheard of in modern football, at least in as high a rank as teams like Man City or Spurs, Liverpool, what have you. For a manager to stay with a club for 6 years, actually I think we're coming about 7 now, which is kind of crazy. It's virtually unheard of, and this also leads into the conversation of, how has Knutsen not been recruited by some Premier League club or something like that? And the answer is he wants nearly full control to basically do whatever he wants at the club in terms of like tactics and things like that. There are people who are talking about the former Air Force pilot, I think, who is the kind of club psychologist or whatever. And I think, yeah, that's important, and that's interesting as a little vignette, whatever. But I think the main point is that Knutsen has been essentially left to his own devices to just do whatever the hell he wants. And that's kind of the key here. He's been trying to implement his own sort of tactics, and at a place like, I don't know, Liverpool or Man City, they would never allow him to have such full control over tactics, over the players and things like that. So it's a bit of the staying power that he has, and the time that he has spent with the club, which allows him to really do what he wants in terms of tactics, and also create a rapport with the players. And speaking of the players, a lot of them have been playing with Bodø for absolute ages, and even ones that haven't, they were maybe sold to other clubs and then came back because they weren't doing great at those clubs. And one of the biggest examples of this is Jens Petter Hauge, who has scored for tons of goals for Bodø Glimt at this point. He was sold to Milan, I believe, AC Milan, not Inter Milan. He was sold to AC Milan, but he didn't really do that well there. But he returned to Bodø Glimt, and now he's scoring all sorts of goals, like almost one goal every match or something crazy like that. And this is also the case for some of the other players, like I believe Evjen was also sold to another club, but then came back for a lower price, actually, for compared to when they were sold. So they actually made a profit off of this, and this is one of their sort of ways of making money at the club, because they're a small club. They don't have a lot of cash necessarily. They don't have like a sovereign wealth fund, an arms company, or oil money or anything like that. They just operate off of their own little income and the money that they get by winning matches and by selling players and getting them back for cheaper than they were sold. So yeah, that's one of the ways in which they get their sort of income. They don't get paid a lot. And another interesting example is Kasper Hogh. I think I'm just going to call it hogh. You can say her if you want, but again, we're speaking English, not Danish or Norwegian. And Kasper Hauge was apparently nearly close to a transfer to I can't remember, was it Leicester or something like that? But it was a club. It was a club in the Premier League that was not doing great. They were like very much at risk of relegation. But he didn't sign that, obviously, and now he's scored against Inter Milan. He has scored against Man City, and I'm pretty sure he scored against Atletico Madrid as well. So but other than Kasper Hauge, you can notice that the vast majority of these players are from Norway. And in the case of Jens Petter Hauge, in the case of, I believe, Evjen as well, and Fett, I think a lot of them aren't just local to Norway, they are local to the town itself. And in the case of Patrick Berg, the current captain of Bodø Glimt, obviously he's playing for Bodø Glimt, but his father played for Bodø Glimt, two of his uncles played for Bodø Glimt, and his grandfather also played for Bodø Glimt. So again, this just reinforces the idea that this is basically a family business. Everyone in the town knows each other, and obviously the Berg family itself does not actually run the football club, but it's this idea that such a small club from such a small town where you can have 3 generations all having played for the same club. There are some of them who have been on and off with the club for more than a decade now, and again, is the discussion on staying power, the discussion of togetherness. Like, are they good players? Sure. Are they world-class players? Maybe not. But the fact that they are playing for so long together is what creates this connection between them, this togetherness. Again, they are greater than the sum of their parts, and that's what really makes their tactics so seamless. Especially, I think it was the second goal against Inter Milan at San Siro, I believe. I can't remember, but it was the second goal against Inter Milan. I think that was scored by Evjen. And it was just some really, really good link-up play, some really good passes. And again, it just shows that they're starting to form almost a hive mind where they know what their teammates are trying to do, where they're trying to pass it to, and they just get the job done. And it is seriously impressive. And, if you've watched this channel for a while, I'm not a big fan of league football, so why am I suddenly talking about league football? Well, I think that Bodø Glimt are bringing back something that is sorely missing in a lot of the top leagues in Europe, and that is togetherness, localness, cohesion. Like, sure, you can buy players if you want. I mean, Kasper Hauge is a player that was transferred from some other club, as was Nikita Häkkinen, but they've stayed with Bodø Glimt for a long time, and they've really integrated with their system very well. And I think that's really what these transfers should be about. It's not necessarily about just getting a player that is technically skilled by themselves, but rather someone who is already who actually fits the system that you want to implement, rather than someone that is just good at playing the ball. Ideally you want to have both, but if not both are available, I think, and I agree with the I guess in this case Knutsen, that what you're looking for really is someone that fits your system, not necessarily someone that is the best at insert skill here. So and a lot of these players, like even Häkkinen, who is Russian, he has played with Bodø for since 2019, basically soon after Knutsen came in, or maybe slightly before, but they've been at the club for the same amount of time, and in this time he has been able to train in terms of goalkeeping and how to save shots from wherever, and he is a pretty damn good goalkeeper, and we'll actually get back to him later. But for now, I think Bodø Glimt has brought something that a lot of clubs in the top leagues, in the Italian league, in Serie A, in the Prem, in Germany, in the Bundesliga, at Liga, Ligue 1, a lot of them are missing the localness and not just buying players for the sake of the players themselves being good. We talk about how this player is very skilled, but we don't talk about how they're going to fit into the system of the club that they're going to. And if you watch the Prem, there are so few English players that it doesn't really mean anything anymore, in a way. Like, obviously I'm going to offend a few people with this, but I kind of look at say Man City, Man United, Liverpool, Spurs, even Newcastle, clubs like these, and half the time the people who score are not English. And obviously you don't necessarily need to have all of your players be English. That would be insane. But I think that should be the priority, as opposed to just trying to get the best player from the best leagues and what have you. So I think Bodø Glimt are really bringing back that spirit of cohesion, togetherness, and localness within reason, right? So with that in mind, I think that is a key part of what makes them so united and so together in terms of attacking, counter-attacking, defense as well, I guess. And given their success, some people have asked maybe how far they can get, and let's take a look at this bracket right here. And this draw took place a couple of days ago, and you've got obviously Man City, Real Madrid for the millionth time, and I'll get back to this in a future video, but let's focus here at the bottom. We've got Bodø Glimt versus Sporting, and then we've also got Arsenal versus Leverkusen. And there are people who are thinking about, could Bodø Glimt beat Sporting, and then if they do that, could they beat Arsenal? Now, I saw one prediction. I think that was from the Irish guy, which frankly, if ever I do watch his videos, it's usually for the entertainment value, not for his ball knowledge or lack thereof, because he predicted that Arsenal would beat Bodø Glimt 8-0. And at that point, I just kind of laughed out loud. Look, I'm not saying that Bodø Glimt are definitely going to beat Arsenal. That is, of course, assuming they even get past Sporting. If they do get past Sporting, could they beat Arsenal? Yes. Could they lose to Arsenal? Absolutely. Could Arsenal beat Bodø Glimt 8-0? No, absolutely not. And I was reminded of this, actually. This is the Europa League. I don't know if this was last year or a couple of years ago, but it was 2022. And this was at home at Bodø, and they beat Arsenal beat them only 1-0. And sure, they beat Arsenal. Arsenal beat Bodø Glimt 3-0 at home, but that was at home. And also, this is a significantly worse Bodø Glimt than we are seeing today, the one that is beating Man City, Atletico Madrid, and Inter Milan in a row. This was a far worse Bodø Glimt, and they only managed a single goal against Bodø Glimt in Bodø. So I'm not sure where the Irish guy is getting his prediction from. The idea that they could somehow put 8 past Bodø Glimt in the modern era and keep a clean sheet against Bodø Glimt is crazy. Again, let's look at their their last few games. The only club to have kept a clean sheet against Bodø Glimt was Monaco. Everyone else, 2 goals, 2 goals, 1 goal, 2 goals, 2 goals, 3 goals, 2, 2, 3. You get the idea? They are in the business of scoring goals. Now, what does this mean for their match against Sporting? Well, I couldn't tell you. I'm actually going to be doing a video where I attempt to predict the results of the Champions League, but you have to stay tuned for that. So I'll talk about that more in the next video. But there is an interesting discussion, which is that they're not in season right now. Their national league, the eliteserien, it ended in November last year and is only about to begin actually in the next couple of weeks. In fact, if you look at this, they've got a match against Molde. I'm not sure where that is, but that's a Norwegian club which is unrelated to the eliteserien. By the way, the eliteserien is the top level of the Norwegian league. But they will have this game against Sarpsborg, which actually takes place after their first leg match against Sporting. So their league, their eliteserien actually starts in between these 2 legs. Between the 2 matches against Sporting. The first one will be at home for Bodø Glimt, and the second they will have to go to Portugal. But in between those, they have this match, their first match of the eliteserien against Sarpsborg, and the week after that, basically, they've got the Sporting home match against Bodø Glimt. So it's an interesting discussion. Some people say that Bodø Glimt are sharper because they're better rested, basically, because they haven't had to deal with their domestic league, unlike, say, PSG or Real Madrid. They aren't exhausted, as it were. Also, like Inter Milan, incidentally. But yeah, you can make the argument that they're better rested, which is why they've faced off better against Inter and Atletico Madrid and so on and so forth. But also, you could argue that they're a bit slower because they haven't gotten into really the competitive flow. And, there is a sense, at least from me, that if this is their preseason, what is going to be their season looking like? Because they play very different styles of football between the eliteserien and the Champions League. Because in the eliteserien, they have a lot of possession. They're known to have a lot of possession, but that's not really possible in the Champions League. So they sit back, they let the opponent take the ball, but often the opponent is wasteful with the ball. So, for example, let's just take a look at this Inter game, right? They had 33 shots. Inter had 33 shots, but only 6 shots on target. Compared to Bodø, or Bodø Glimt, people keep telling me that is Bodø Glimt, the team, not Bodø. The Bodø is just the town. Anyway, Bodø Glimt had only 7 shots, but they had 5 shots on target with just 30% possession, which, again, it goes to show they are not wasteful with possession. They are, they do what they need to do. They get what they need to do, get it done. And whereas Inter, they've got tons and tons of shots all over the place, but only 6 of them are on target, and even then, only 1 of them managed to make it into the actual goal. So, yeah, it's important to keep this in mind, that Bodø Glimt, another factor of their success is that their possession is not wasteful. They get to doing what they need to get done, basically, and you can see that in this game. You can see that in some of the previous games as well, I believe. If we go to, say, the match against Man City, 15 shots, and he had the same number of shots on target, even though Bodø Glimt only had almost half the number of shots taken by Man City, and yeah, that's the thing, and almost half the number of passes as well compared to Man City. So yeah, that's another thing. They are very careful about what they do with the ball. They've got really high quality passes and things like that. So yeah, this is another thing about them and what makes them so deadly. They take the ball and they just get to work, essentially. But getting back on point, they have the eliteserien, which starts between these two legs against Sporting, and it's going to be interesting to see whether this has a visible effect. Are they maybe a bit slower, or are they maybe a bit sharper? People make the argument both ways, and I can see where they're coming from, but let's just see how that goes. And finally, there are people who are saying, they should just take this Bodø Glimt squad and take them to the World Cup. Well, that's not really possible, because there are a lot of really good players in the national team, and also they just play different football compared to the national team. The national team is the coach for the national team is solbakken, and he plays a very aggressive style of football, a almost risky style of football, but it works out because they have some top tier wingers, they have some top tier attackers, like obviously Erling Haaland, but they also have Sorloth, they have Schjelderup, Strand Larsen, Oscar Bob, Antonio Nusa, Sanderberg, Patrick Berg, who is from Bodø, by the way. And you get the idea. Like, Bjørkan is also from Bodø, but I would say after this whole Champions League thing, I think we have to start talking about putting some more of the Bodø Glimt squad onto the national team. Obviously, the prime name for that would be Jens Petter Hauge, and I would love to have Jens Petter Hauge as kind of a super sub, maybe for the Norwegian national team. And in fact, I think I've seen Solbakken talking about that. I've been my Twitter timeline has been unusually Norwegian as of late, and yeah, I think I have seen discussion of having Jens Petter Hauge on the Norwegian national team. But I might also suggest Sandra Fett and also, who is it? Evian as well. But there's another name in here that could make the national team, and that is Heiken. It may seem surprising to you, but actually Heiken, ever since signing for Bodø Glimt in 2019, he has settled down in Bodø and has even gotten married to a Norwegian. And apparently he's currently in the process of getting Norwegian citizenship. And if he does get it in time for the World Cup, we could well have Heiken as the goalkeeper for the national team versus just having Nuland, who, don't get me wrong, he's good, but I've heard that there's some drama surrounding him. I'm not really sure what's going on, but I think he's being kind of left on the bench as a backup goalkeeper for Sevilla, which that's what he's playing. That's the club he's playing for. But we could instead have Nikita Heiken, who's Russian and actually I think Israeli born, although we don't know like his stance on Ukraine and on Palestine, for example. But he is Russian Israeli by kind of nationality and ethnicity. But yeah, he's been playing with Bodø and in Norway for the last 6-7 years now, and he is very much settled down and it could potentially join the Norwegian national team if he gets his citizenship in time. And there's always this discussion over club versus country. There are some players that play better for the club than with their national team. For example, Antoine Semenyo, and I would argue Dominic Soboslai as well. Some of these players, they just don't play that well with the national team. Maybe because the national team doesn't have as coherent of a strategy, and obviously they train relatively less than they do with their club. but there are also players who go the other way. You know, they play better with the national team than for their club. I would say Troy Parrott is one of those, and I would say actually quite a few of these players on the Norwegian national team actually play quite substantially better for the national team than they do for their respective clubs. Like, let's not talk about Haaland. I think he does pretty damn well in Man City, but I would argue he does better in the national team against various opponents. Another one that I think really shines in the national team is Antonio Nusa. You know, you don't really hear about his escapades at Leipzig, but for the national team, he has done amazing work. He is like the best winger of all time, and I think that's also the same for a lot of the other players as well, like Sorloth. I mean, Sorloth, he scored a brace against was it Club Brugge? I can't remember, but he scored a brace recently. But Sorloth, believe it or not, he plays even better for the Norwegian national team. And Schjelderup as well. I think Schjelderup also scored something recently for Benfica, and yeah, again, it's just part of the discussion of club versus country. But I think I was talking about this with a friend. I was asking, if Norway played against Man City, who would win? And honestly, I would say Norway wins. He disagreed. He thought that basically the Norwegian defense wasn't good enough, and maybe it isn't. They are not necessarily known to be defensive powerhouses. But I think that the Norwegian attack in general, even if you assume that somehow Haaland clones himself and plays for both Norway and for Man City, if we pitted Norway against Man City, I still feel like Norway would win, just because the Norwegian attack is so potent, so strong, and it's just part of that conversation. And I think that's also true. There's also a discussion to be had about Bodø in all of this. I think, you don't really hear about Berg or Bjørkan on the national team because they're not like the stars of the team. But whereas in the club, actually, they play really well. They are an integral part of the midfield or of the defenses and things like that. So yeah, Bjørkan, obviously, Berg, and also Jens Petter Hauge. I think Hauge definitely needs to get called up more, though. He has played 13 caps, which is actually more than Schjelderup, funnily enough. But it's an interesting conversation for sure. But I would say for the Norwegian national team in particular, ironically not including Bodø Glimt, I think the players play substantially better for the national team than they do for their respective clubs, with the exception of the Bodø Glimt players. But that being said, I would still like to see Jens Petter Hauge and Ove Odegaard, obviously, but Jens Petter Hauge, maybe Evjen, maybe Fett for the national team, and obviously, if they can get him, Heiken would be great as well. So, yeah, it's a very interesting conversation. Although I do find it interesting that as of late, the only player to consistently score against Norway, both for club and for country, is Pio Esposito, who plays both for the Italian national team and more recently for Inter Milan. The one goal in the 4-1 match between Norway and Italy at the San Siro, that was scored by Pio Esposito. And in the Bodø Glimt home game, which was in Bodø, Pio Esposito was the one responsible for the one goal in the 3-1 result at the end. In the 2-1 at the San Siro between Bodø Glimt and Inter, that was actually scored by Bastoni, but it is interesting that Pio Esposito, who is also one of the younger talents on the Italian national team is the one who is scoring more goals against the Norwegian side, whether it's the Norwegian national team or Bodø Glimt. So that's gonna do it for this video of me kind of just analyzing Bodø Glimt, which is the wonder kid at this point of Norwegian football, but it also points to a wider phenomenon in Norwegian football that, is just getting better. A lot of investment has been made in like the academy and such, and that shows both through Bodø Glimt and through the Norwegian national team. Of course, like I said, we have Sorloth, Holland, Schjelderup, Strand Larsen, Oscar Wilde, Nusa, Sanderberg, Patrick Berg, Bjørkan, Ayer, Nuland, and also Odegaard, who hasn't been playing for a while. I think he was injured or something like that. But obviously, Odegaard, Jens Petter Hauge actually played for the national team, but that was way back March last year. So hopefully he gets called up a bit more. But Norwegian football is in a really, really good place right now. And who better to show off that fact than Bodø Glimt or Bodø Glimt? But that is going to do it for the analysis part of this video. But I want to make a tiny little announcement, which is that I'll be doing a watch-along of the first leg of Bodø Glimt playing Sporting. That's right, I'm doing my first ever football match watch along. I'm going to be watching Bodø Glimt playing Sporting, online of course, and that's because I've actually got some proper Wi-Fi that can allow me to stream while watching a stream, for this first leg at least. I can't do that for the second leg, but for this first leg, I will be going live shortly before the match. Hopefully, if I don't fall asleep or something like that, but I will be up to watch the match, the first leg of Bodø Glimt playing Sporting in Bodø, so that will be very interesting. And if you're excited about that as well, feel free to join the stream at that point. And you can see here it's Thursday morning for me, but it's obviously going to be earlier for you if you're in Europe or in the Americas. So I'll be doing a watch along, and you can be there as well if you're interested. And that is gonna do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed my analysis of Bodø Glimt. Like this video if you did, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my upcoming content, including my predictions for the remainder of the UEFA Champions League. Hope to see some of you at the stream, at the watch along for the first leg of Bodø Glimt playing Sporting, and I'll see you next time.